We live in an age of Christian feminism, and this has produced two cultural scripts that popular female-oriented evangelical and Christian blogs give to young women who want to get married. And these scripts can be summarized something like this, and they vary from region to region and clique to clique, but the two scripts go something like this. First, you are beautiful no matter what you look like. Second, the more you talk about your own victimhood, the more you empower yourself to overcome that victimhood. Okay, those are the two scripts. Number one, you're beautiful no matter what you look like, and you deserve a husband no matter what you look like. And number two, the more you talk about your own victimhood, the more you empower yourself to overcome that victimhood. The more bitter you are, the more power you have to manifest your desires as reality. So, both of these scripts communicate truth claims about reality which are not only untrue and impractical, but actually harmful to those women who unwittingly adopt them. And here we are going to unpack the inferences of those statements and the harm that it causes to those who hold to them, and the practical ways that young women can overcome the untruth and self-sabotage induced by their perpetuation. Women who adopt these scripts usually self-identify as Christian feminists. Whether or not they identify as Christian feminists is less significant than whether they believe the scripts themselves. It will be helpful initially to remark that the term feminism in its modern form, at the very least, connotes intersectional assumptions that I'm not comfortable adopting. And these assumptions focus on so-called marginalized groups, which seek to rectify the power imbalance caused by a majority population. As the story goes, in this case, white Christian men, presumably, right? And this majority group, in this theory, normalize systems which facilitate the fulfillment of their own interests at the expense of women. That's what the term feminism connotes. And the term feminism, like any term, doesn't have to be helpful or unhelpful. And that's part of the gift that post-structuralism and postmodernism has given us. It has given us autonomy from words, so that if a word becomes too loaded, we can just pick another word to refer to the same reality, right? But since the term feminism highlights the plight of women specifically, the very obstacle these scripts with which I disagree seek to overcome, I'd like to advocate that those seeking an ideology that facilitates true equality, true functional egalitarianism among common Christians, right? Something that facilitates true equality ought to replace this term feminist. And the word that I would like to suggest that we use instead of feminism, because people say, yeah, I'm a feminist because I want equality for women. No, the term is too loaded. The term is too loaded, and the agenda of feminism baked into the very lexeme itself is to center the epheme, is to center the woman, to recenter the woman. And that's not the ultimate agenda. That's not the foundational, structural, philosophical framework that will cultivate common individual autonomy, common individual dignity and power and self-respect and success. The term that I would like to suggest is, rather than feminism, classical liberalism. And classical liberalism is rooted in political thinkers like Immanuel Kant, who I think is... Some people say that he was a very unclear writer. I think he was superlatively clear. So Immanuel Kant, and then later John Locke and Adam Smith, and the founders of our great nation. And classical liberalism advocates the inalienable rights of the individual, and free speech and free trade. And classical liberals relied upon the mutual self-interest that society's individuals had to publicly debate and cooperate with one another without compulsion or force. It is a structure built around the dignity and responsibility of each individual. And this framework sets the historical precedent within which the liberation of women could be conceived in the 19th and 20th centuries. And it is in those most oppressive hierarchical nations and non-egalitarian nations that favor compelled speech and redistribution that women often do the worst. So as a semantic point, it is important to point out that I do not consider myself a feminist. A lot of guys do, because feminists have sort of claimed that feminism simply implies the desire for equality. It does not. There are intersectional assumptions baked into the term, which I fundamentally reject. And so, as a semantic point, it is important to point out that I don't consider myself a feminist because the very term assumes that females are disempowered and disadvantaged by a patriarchal system, and are therefore entitled to superior and superfluous benefits due to their sex in order to achieve an equality of outcome. And I fundamentally disagree with that. I philosophically and practically reject that notion, because that's not how people work. That's not how systems work. That's not how governments and societies and individuals succeed. I disagree with this idea, and I will proceed with my engagement with these cultural scripts neither as a feminist nor as a chauvinist. I reject that binary. Rather, I'm a classical liberal who believes that the great middling power of respect for human dignity, which was really codified and expressed most clearly in Aristotle, but is rooted and it has been cultivated in the West, based on a Judeo-Christian system of beliefs and values. And it is in this system in which both women and men most greatly flourish. So those are the assumptions I'm bringing into this analysis, and those are the assumptions, the intersectional feminist assumptions are the ones that I reject. And I'd also like to begin this analysis by making a comment about the so-called male gaze. Christian feminism infers that male physical attraction toward women is objectification of the female body that perpetuates a rape culture, right? And this idea has been encapsulated in the moniker the male gaze, which has been sort of the whipping boy of modern Christian feminism. I can wear yoga pants if I want to, and you can't do anything about it, and you're a dirty man if you think dirty thoughts, right? That's sort of the Christian feminist approach. Boys are yucky, and we ought to bake that into our modern public theology, right? And the fact is that most beautiful women do not buy into this script. They recognize their own beauty. They recognize the natural gifting and the cultivation required to achieve the cultural and natural ideal of female beauty. And this notion of the male gaze is dirty and male physical attraction toward women is evil is self-destructive, insofar as it has allied itself with the so-called fat positive movement, which champions the argument that obese individuals are both beautiful and healthy, and that the notion obese is ugly is a socially constructed fetish, and it's not Christian, and that it has normalized itself and marginalized the obese, right? And there are academics writing this. Or it is fat positivity and fat advocacy has become a part of the intersexual movement. Obesity is actually an intersectional victim card that you can now play, and of course. There's such a thing, and in this fat positive literature, they'll speak of skinny privilege and things like that. Okay, so of course, this is all absurd. Beauty is not simply in the eye of the beholder. We all know this, and yet intersectionality pushes Christian feminists to insist that you don't trust your lying eyes, right? Obese and unkempt women are really just as beautiful as women who stay in shape and practice self-care. It's all the same, really, right? It's just a matter. It's just that men have to escape their twisted minds to see the beauty in sort of bitter feminists who don't take care of themselves, right? Now, the Christian feminist will object at this point as well, and insist that the issue isn't really with the beauty of women per se, and that to say that it is missing the point. The problem is with the male gaze. The problem is with the male psyche, which is twisted and distorted, which prioritizes physical beauty over the beauties inherent in godliness and personality and care and things like that. The problem is that most Christian feminist women come off as both ugly and bitter, and never more so than when they rebuke men for the sin of being men, which is to say that they are attracted to physical beauty. And Christian feminists will also object that the male preference for small, petite, skinny women places an unattainable physical requirement on women, which compels them to become anorexic and thereby to develop self-harming mental illnesses and things like that. And here, I'm going to address all of these points, all of them in the form of 8 pieces of advice. And this advice, you can take it or leave it. You can love it. You can hate it. You can call me a chauvinist and bigot and sexist and dirty animal if you want. I really don't care. This is the truth. This is the way it is. And this is my take on our Christian cultural moment. And I haven't seen anybody say this to the shame of evangelical publishing platforms. I haven't seen anybody say these things. I think because they're so scared of crossing bayonets with this Christian intersectional feminist movement. They're so scared of losing their female readership that most Christian outlets will never say anything like this, even though it's what most Christian men are thinking most of the time. So, piece of advice number 1. Women, especially single Christian women, stay in shape. Okay, women ought to stay in shape. Now, this initial point, you can take it as a chauvinist, you can take it as a sexist, you can take it as me pushing the male gaze. It's not. It actually has nothing to do with men. You see, every person should stay in shape, right? Every person should make themselves strong. They should make themselves fit. And it is at this point established medical fact in the arthritis community that being obese means that your joint life will be much shorter and you have a higher risk for arthritis. Okay. An article in the Springer journal, Age, found that being stronger means you actually live longer. Leg strength is correlated with longevity of life. Okay. Women who are in shape are better able to defend themselves against attackers. A recent article in the journal Frontiers in Public Health found that women who eat healthier are more fertile. Women who regularly lift weights and build strength and gain muscle and perform cardiovascular exercise and maintain a body fat percentage between 20 to 25% and eat healthy foods, they live better lives and they live longer lives. There is not a single legitimate argument to be made against the statement single Christian women should stay in shape. And if they're not in shape, they should get in shape as soon as possible. Ladies, it's your body. Make it as strong and able and lean as you can. Practice the best physical self-care that you can possibly practice. And you're not going to get this message from a lot of your older female mentors because most women have failed to do this because this hasn't been a cultural message for a long time. The cultural message for a long time is that women need to be small and weak and deferential and petite. But I think that we're going to be on that, which leads to our second point, which is this. So the first is single Christian women, you need to stay in shape. You need to keep your bodies in shape because everybody should keep their bodies in shape. You will live a better life. You will live a happier life. You will live a longer life. You will have more of the things that you want than if you were to live your life without being in shape. And it's a choice that you make. Number 2, men don't want anorexic women. They don't. And you say, oh, yeah, but they want the results of anorexia. They want skinny women. No, they don't. That is a trope from the 80s and the 90s that is officially over, okay? We have officially evolved out of the anorexic models are attractive stage of American culture. That's not even a thing anymore. That time is over. All that anti-anorexia, pro-fat, Christian feminist women stuff out there, they need to stop saying that physical requirements on women produce eating disorders, right? Have you been on Instagram lately? We live in an age of the booty, okay? We live in an age where the newest, hottest models on Instagram are CrossFitters and bodybuilders and powerlifters who are strong. And in terms of what the male gaze is looking for, strong is the new hot. And it has taken a long time for our culture to arrive at this place, but it's here now. The male preference or the male gaze and optimal female health have never been so aligned. But in our cultural moment, they are completely aligned. Men want healthy, strong, capable, fast, physically able women. That's what men want now. Men want women that they can work out with. Men want women who are self-empowered. Men want women who act and look and live healthy lives. So the whole anorexia critique of the male gaze has no basis anymore, not in our cultural moment. Young girls who want to become the ideal physical specimen in order to increase their chances of finding a husband, they shouldn't be starving themselves. They should be eating lots of good food, lots of good chicken and steak and broccoli and spinach, all of the same things that guys should be eating, right? And they should be performing a lot of squats and deadlifts and pull-ups, okay? That empowers women, and it's good for women. And it just so happens in our cultural moment to be what men want. Men don't want anorexic women. Number 3, men prefer beautiful women. And this will never stop being true. Men prefer beautiful women, and this will never stop being true. More than that, they will never stop not being attracted to unattractive women, okay? This phenomenon is self-correcting insofar as every man's expectations for himself will adjust to his potential to find a mate, right? There is this movement in Christian feminism that encourages women to remain obese and overweight in order to spite male preference. And it might not even be explicit, but it's anti-exercise and anti-diet because, oh girl, you should just love yourself. Oh girl, any guy who wants you for your body, he's just an animal. That is so stupid. That is, in the words of Donald Trump, that is such a stupid question. That is the way that you will guarantee your search for a husband will become so much harder, so much harder. You are only making your life harder for you. If you never want to get married, you can do whatever you want. I still think you should stay in shape, but you can do whatever you want, right? But if you are looking for a husband, you will never curtail male nature. A woman who is going to stay in shape in order she says, oh, I don't want to bait, she doesn't want to attract men who are animals. So she wants to stay obese in order to only attract men who are attracted to her inner person. You don't understand men at all. You will never curtail male nature. Men are more naturally physically oriented beings. It's biology, and women think that they're going to change that, especially Christian women. They think they're going to change that. They sort of co-opt Christianity as a way to reject masculinity and to essentially neuter evangelical culture. And the fact that they've been able to is really a failure of men, I think. But what women need to do, especially single Christian women who are complaining about not being able to find husbands, is they need to stop complaining about the male gaze. They need to stop complaining about the male standard for beauty. Stop complaining about it and start eating a healthy diet and performing a healthy exercise program. That is the way forward, okay? Men prefer beautiful women, and this will never stop being true. I'm not saying that you should starve yourself. You should, if you do that, you're likewise lowering your chances, right? I'm saying you should conform to the physical ideal, which most predictably attracts men, if you are a pragmatist. If you're an idealist and you don't care about getting results, do whatever you want. Live your martyr's life as an obese person. It's a free country. But if you desire to find a husband and you desire to find the best husband that you can find, the better in shape you are, the more likely you are to find a higher quality husband. That's a fact. It's a pragmatic fact. And you will either utilize that information or you won't. Physical preference doesn't indicate shallowness. So just because a man is attracted to a woman's physical body, that doesn't mean he isn't interested in other elements as well. Okay, men want to be connected physically and emotionally and mentally to their spouses and potential spouses. So if a man is disinterested in you because of your physical appearance, that doesn't mean he's a shallow man. He might have expectations that reach outside of his own capacity. He may need to settle for something or improve himself, right? But he might have too high a standard for himself as well. A man has not committed a moral wrong for being disinterested in a woman because of her appearance. A man does not owe a woman his love or attraction. Just because he asked you on a date, that doesn't mean he owes you a second date. Just because he took you on a second date, that doesn't mean he owes you a third date. And just because you went on a couple dates, that doesn't mean he owes you an hour-long DTR, define the relationship conversation explaining his disinterest. And in fact, this leads us into a common myth that there's a myth. And it goes like this. Every woman is worthy of love. I don't agree with that. People don't deserve love, either in a Christian sense or in a secular sense. Right? Because as soon as you deserve love, that means it's something that other people are obligated to give you. And it breaks down in a couple ways. Number one, from a Christian perspective, well, God's love is gracious, which means that he deigns to love us. If we deserved God's love, then his love toward us and the cross would have been obligatory. They would not have been gracious. It would have been something he was obligated to do rather than something God freely chose to do by grace. It's grace, particularly because we didn't deserve it. So that's the sort of the Christian element. And I don't think that there's an analogy between how God acts in the gospel and how Christians ought to date, because then you get down to the level of human-to-human interaction. Well, what do you mean that I don't know if any one person deserves love? Right? I think that the image of God entails that we all are made in the image of God and thereby have human dignity. Therefore, we ought to respect and honor one another. We ought to do the best that we can communally and as citizens to care for one another and to protect one another. That's why the United States government is one of the most Christian and best governmental constructions that the world has ever known. Right? Because it practices this respect for human dignity. But this moves to the question, well, what do you mean every woman deserves to be loved? Because I've had people tell me this before in response to some of the things that I'm saying here, right? Every woman deserves to be loved. Well, what do you mean? In the abstract, do they deserve to be loved? Because there's no such thing as being loved in the abstract. When you say that a woman deserves to be loved, you're saying you have to say, well, by whom? By whom does she deserve to be loved? And if you say, well, in the abstract, well, that doesn't make sense. There's no such thing as being loved in the abstract. You say, well, she deserves to be loved by a particular individual. By whom? If you say that she deserves to be loved by every suitor that she dates, well, that's not true, because they haven't promised her anything. The only man who owes a woman love is a man who has pledged himself to love a woman, which is to say a woman's husband owes her love, because he has pledged it to her, because he has made vows. No single Christian woman is deserving of love. Whether or not a man chooses to love her and whether or not she chooses to love a man is a matter of consent, not obligation. So we need to stop saying this. We need to stop saying this script that, every woman is worthy of love. What do you mean? What do you mean? Should her parents love her? Sure. Yes, absolutely. I think that's probably a good thing to say, that her parents ought to love her. Right? Should people show her loving respect as human beings who coexist in this world? Absolutely. That also sounds like a good idea, right? But that's not what they mean. They mean that a woman deserves to be loved in a romantic way by a partner, and that it's never right for a woman to be rejected. That is false. It's a moral falsehood. It's an epistemic falsehood. It's a social falsehood. It's a philosophical falsehood. Okay, it's not true. It's not true. Women do not deserve to be loved. Men do not deserve to be loved. Okay? That's what makes love so special. That's what makes love so beautiful, that it's a choice and that two people consent to vow to one another, to love one another for their entire lives. It's always a choice. Love is always a choice. Because as soon as you have this, and this is the entitlement that Christian feminism produces. It's the sense of, I am owed love. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're not owed love, because what you're saying in the abstract is going to have concrete manifestations for the way that you relate to men, and you're going to relate to men in your dating relationship as if you were entitled to their commitment, and you are not. You are not. So that's a myth that needs to be debunked. Number 5, the male gaze is not evil, and it does not perpetuate rape culture. It's some of this stuff. It's like. It's like reading postmodern literary criticism, honestly. Sometimes it's just like reading gibberish. But the male gaze is not evil, and it does not perpetuate rape culture. So men are not evil for working the way that they do. God created male and female. Male levels of testosterone biologically compel him to consider physical appearance more than the so-called female gaze. Right? God created male and female, Genesis 1:27. There are ideals for the female body and mind that would be unfitting for the male to embody. So for example, if a man never took charge and asked a girl out that he was interested in, but rather he waited for girls to express interest in him, that would be a tragic man. That would be unfitting for him. And in the same way that it is fitting for men to initiate romantic encounters, and it's not unfitting for women to express romantic interest. It's not necessarily unladylike for a woman to initiate, but it is particularly unmasculine for a man to be deferential when he is interested. Okay, but all that to say, it would in the same way that it is fitting for men to initiate romantic encounters, and it is unfitting for them to be fearful, it is also fitting that they be attracted to the ideals of the female body. The male gaze is not evil. It is not oppressive. It is simply male. And in that regard, it is simply human. You may never understand it, but if you never accept or appreciate it, you will never find a loving husband with which you can accord to marry on common terms. And if you do, he will be resentful toward you if you can't accept and appreciate the fact that he is a man and what that entails. Okay? If you cannot accept the masculinity of a man and accept that he is seeking to be the ideal man, he is compelled to seek to be the ideal man, and he is compelled to seek after the ideal woman. Okay? If you can't accept or appreciate that, he will be resentful toward you, and you will be resentful toward him. The male gaze does not perpetuate rape culture, as if rape culture were a thing. It's not a thing. We live in the best, least rapey society the world has ever known. And male attractiveness to the female body is an opportunity for a man to restrain himself and to practice chastity until marriage and defend women from evil men whose sin has turned them into predators. Okay, that's what men want to do. They want to protect. They want to court women, and they want to find the best women they can find, and they want to protect women from evil men. That's what men want to do. The male gaze is every man's opportunity to find the woman he wants to spend the rest of his life with, and it is every woman's opportunity to meet that gaze and to participate with him through marriage in erotic love. And if she fundamentally shames him for the qualitatively male aspect of his eros, of his eroticism, well, that fundamentally breaks any common accord with which a man and woman could enter into an intimate relationship. If it begins with judgment, if it begins with rejection, if it begins with a Christian feminist antipathy toward what masculinity irrevocably is. And that is a beautiful thing. And and the construal of the male preference for the ideal female physical form, the construal of that as evil, which Christian feminism has absolutely done, is heinous and it's hypocritical. If you view male preference for the ideal female physical form as evil, you have brought into dating and into intimacy and into love a Marxist script that has led you to believe that you are entitled to something to which you are not entitled. Point 6. The average honest woman will admit that she actually wants to be desired. Okay, the average honest woman will admit that she desires to be desired. Now, Christian feminists convey the very thing that they want by rejecting it so vehemently. If everyone in high school hated the popular kids because they wanted to be the popular kids. And Christian feminists are composed largely of women who actually want to be the object of the male gaze, which is really just male preference for women, but they haven't yet been its object. And yes, the pornification and objectification of women by secular culture is evil. All that stuff treats women like meat. That's the kind of stuff that real men want to protect women from, right? Of course, all of that stuff is evil. The pornification of the American male mind, that's bad. But that's not what's happening. That's not what's going on in the male preference for physical beauty. That's not what's happening. That's not what we're talking about. And most Christian feminists are so blind to the complexity of male psychology that they don't even have a millisecond of patience to try to understand what it's like for men to desire female beauty. They don't even get it. They don't even have the patience for it. They don't have the stomach for it. We're talking about the male preference for healthy women, and that is a good thing. If you want to find yourself within that preference, then be a healthy woman. And in this regard, Christian feminism is exactly what it sounds like. It is a Marxist redistributionist approach to dating, to Christian dating, that guarantees equality of outcome for ugly girls and pretty girls alike, which co-opts the language of grace and godliness in the hope of guilting red-blooded men into finding unattractive and bitter women attractive and pleasant. And like real Marxism, it doesn't work. It will only create an uprising. Okay, don't date by grace. Do not date by grace. Never date by grace. It sounds good, but you will pay the cost. Ultimately, all relational vows are meritocratic. Okay, date by free market capitalism. Date by merit and date by values. That doesn't mean you don't forgive the person. That doesn't mean that you're a perfectionist. You have to be realistic. You have to be a pragmatist. Okay, if you're an idealist, if you're a female idealist, if you're a male idealist, you'll never get married. You have to be a pragmatist. You have to date like a pragmatist, which means you have to date like a free market capitalist. Marriage is about building something, and you can't build much if you're dating someone who thinks your fundamental impulse to be sexually attracted to her physical beauty is evil. Okay, any girl who believes that, they are not ready to be in a relationship. They are not ready to be in a healthy Christian relationship. They're not. Date by the free market system. That's a Baptist value, okay? Date according to a free markets model. That is the closest thing to Christian dating you're ever going to get. It's not dating by grace. It's being honest with yourself and saying, what do I want? What do I value? What other girl can partner with me and appreciate what I have to offer as well, with whom I can partner to build a life together? Okay. You're not a Marxist. You're not a feminist. You're a Christian. So if you're a lady, recognize that you need to distinguish between offering your value to a future husband and commoditizing yourself. You don't have to sell your soul to compete to a husband, because on the other end, your husband is actually competing for you, or your future spouse, I should say, is actually competing for you. You should only commoditize yourself. And there really is nothing wrong with thinking about it that way in a very simple sense of commoditizing yourself. You know, not in a pornification sense, but in a sense in which you become technical about the way in which you self-improve in order to attract a spouse, right? There's nothing, you should only commoditize yourself to the degree that you can attain what you desire while remaining true to yourself. And don't let feminists tell you any different. Don't let a feminist sort of look at you working out and say, oh girl, you have a mental disorder because you aren't accepting yourself and you have some sort of dysmorphia or disorder, or you have to work through your daddy issues. You should accept yourself and then you'll find a man. Or Christian feminists will tell many girls, hey, you're not ready to be in a relationship until you realize what your value is, until you realize that men shouldn't be going after you like a piece of meat. It's like, listen, the male desire for physical beauty is not evil, and it is not shallow. It is an irrevocable aspect of the male impulse to date. Without it, men wouldn't ask women out in the first place. And for women to desire to cultivate that in order to increase their chances of achieving the goal that they have set for themselves of finding a spouse is not only good, but practical, and will beat out Christian feminists 10 times out of 10 who have the same goal. 7. You can use the male gaze to your advantage. So the predictability of the male gaze doesn't have to be a curse. It can be a blessing to you if you have the goal of finding a spouse. So use it to your advantage. It's almost a law of the universe. If you get in shape, more men will be interested in you. That is a law. That is a universal law. And that will give you an opportunity to actually showcase all of the godliness and personality and character that you so desire for a man to know. And if you know that there is gold at the top of a mountain, you have two options. Climb the mountain and get the gold, or start a blog about how stupid mountain climbing is and how overinflated gold has become. The person who climbs the mountain gets the gold. The person who starts the blog gets a blog. Now, there are plenty of men who need to hear the same message, and that is a completely different article or video or podcast or whatever. Okay, that's a very different thing. Christian feminists often decry the lack of marriageable men. So, where have all the good men gone? There's no good Christian guys out there. I'll tell you where all the Christian men are, where all the good Christian men are. They've all gone to the local bar or the local cigar bar to complain that all the Christian women are out of shape. That's where they are. That's exactly where they are. And you could be the woman who walks into that bar and makes one of those guys melt at his knees. And now the burden's on him. Now the burden is on him. And as a woman, the odds are on your side if you are in shape. Marriageable Christian men far outnumber marriageable Christian women. In society generally, men are far more often looking for women than women are looking for men. Men are in competition for the female gaze, and they don't complain about it. Men learn early on that they can either cry about having to compete for women with other men, or they can make themselves as strong and competent and marriageable as possible in order to find a wife. Now, many women are simply opting out of competition altogether. The ugly truth is that they are still in competition with those other women for men. But the scripts they've adopted have guaranteed their placement far outside of the male gaze. If a Christian man had to choose to marry a woman who is out of shape and bitter, or to marry the same woman who is in shape and positive, the choice would be very clear to him. Number 8, stop being bitter. It's killing your chances. Don't be bitter. Do not be resentful. This is a big problem for Christian feminist women, a big problem. If you are a Christian feminist and you desire to find a husband and you are overweight and cynical, one of those variables has to undergo radical change in order for your desires to be fulfilled. And any red-blooded man will want you to be in shape and to be a positive person. Should men also desire women who are godly and funny and have a good personality match with them? Yes, of course, absolutely. The assumption is that those things are happening. The problem is that most Christian books and blogs don't actually talk about the physical aspect. They assume that male physical attraction for women is evil. They treat it that way functionally. But there are women out there who are godly and funny and have great personalities, and they stay in shape and they stay positive. And if you neglect the physical aspect of what you have to offer, you will lose in competition to other women every single time. But you can use this to your advantage because you can become the girl who wins a man's heart. And you can become the girl who a man sees as wanting to win her heart. You can increase your chances of connecting with a man by getting in shape. That is, any woman who complains about that, or who says that's not true, or who says we live in a world where that needs to change, it's never going to change. That will never be untrue. You can increase your chances of connecting with a man and finding a spouse if you get in better shape. It is a hard truth for some people to hear. But it's not a result of the fall. It's just life. It's just how men and women work. And non-Christian, non-feminist women instinctively know this. They instinctively know that these feminist scripts are complete BS. They're not gender traders. Just like non-Christian men know that if they want to compete for a worthwhile spouse, they must be in good shape. They must have a good career track, right? They must be funny and emotionally intelligent and personable. And it's not wrong to be those things. And it's certainly not wrong to want those things. So be the very best you can be for your search for a husband. And in doing so, you will attract the kind of man who makes themselves the very best that they can be for their future wives. And just as a tangential point here, we ought to point out that women who can't understand what it's like for men to want to be with a beautiful woman, they need to understand that men go through this exact same thing in terms of their career. Women date and go after and prefer men who will make a lot of money or be high profile, high platform performers. That's who women go after, men who are charismatic and high earners. And you as a woman might say, oh, I don't care what my man looks like. I don't care what career he has. I just want love. Then you are not playing the game at the level that most of these guys are operating. I think Christian women, especially Christian feminists generally, operate at a level below where men are trying to operate. And that's where all the good men are. You're playing a game at level 2, and most Christian guys are fighting 10-1 for girls who are playing at their same level. And that's why most Christian women can't find a guy, because they're simply not playing at the same level where all the guys are playing. And the only exception to this rule, if you want to attract one of those, the only exception to this rule is if you're a Christian feminist and you're okay with attracting one of those like male feminist types, one of those like beta male type guys, right? Then you should totally be as bitter and out of shape as possible, and as resentful and screeching about the oppressive patriarchy and the male gaze and rape culture. Yeah. Keep talking about all that. If you want to marry a male feminist type, you should keep talking about all that stuff. But I should actually say you probably should stay in shape even if you're trying to date a male feminist, because even male feminists are still men. 9, don't hate shallow men. Just don't date them. Okay, so if there is a Christian guy out there who only cares about marrying a 10, well, yeah, you don't want to be with that guy anyway, right? He's the ultimate. He's like the Christian douchebag, right? Don't be with him. He's on his own journey, okay? And even for that guy, his goal shouldn't be to repent of his physical attraction to beautiful women or to repent from his preference to marry a beautiful woman. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. That guy's journey should be, if he's a Christian, his journey of sanctification should be to mature his sense of attraction to something which also takes into account immaterial qualities like godliness and grace and personality, right? And there is an entirely separate article, like we've already mentioned, entirely separate video worth writing on what single Christian men need to do. But that's not what we're doing here. This is a call for single Christian women who have bought deeply into these harmful feminist scripts to lay them down and to improve themselves and to accept that improving one's body and improving one's aesthetic and attitude for the sake of finding a husband is not idolatry. It's not traitorous toward one's gender. And it's certainly not ungodly. In fact, it's one of the most self-beneficial, godly, womanly things you can do. Stay in shape and stay positive. Now, I just want to make a little addendum note to pastors, and it's this. Okay, pastors need to stop guilting guys about their preference for gorgeous women. It is so common. It is too common for this pastor who is married to a beautiful woman to get up in the pulpit and to start shaming and condemning men in his church for choosing not to marry the homely looking single females in the church. That it is a harmful and hypocritical message. I rag on Matt Chandler too much. I'm sure Matt Chandler's a great guy. I'm sure I'd get along with him, but I've heard him say this before. I've heard him say in a message, that guys need to stop. The guys' standards are too high, right? And if guys, and that it's a sin, right? And it's like, you look at Matt Chandler, you look at his marriage, and you think, okay, this guy's telling me that my physical standards of beauty are too high. Meanwhile, he's married to a gorgeous woman. I don't think that this is a credible rebuke. I just don't. You cannot do it. You can't do it. Okay? Pastors who have beautiful wives do not have the credibility to stand up in the pulpit and tell guys in their congregation to lower their physical standards. You do not have the credibility to do it. It is hypocritical. It is ungodly. It is baseless. And it sends the wrong message. It sends an unbiblical message. And it buys into this Christian feminist leftist script that men are evil for wanting the female ideal. Now, if men want to get married, they may need to undergo certain pragmatic reconditioning of their standards for practical purposes of finding a spouse, right? They may be outshooting their own capability of what they can achieve. But pastors who are sending this message that men in general need to just settle down and get married to a homely girl in the church who's not taking care of herself, nope. It's not true. You need to stop that. You absolutely need to stop that. And here's the conclusion. Ultimately, Christian feminism hurts Christian feminists most because its scripts produce women who deprive themselves of the very things that they aim to achieve. Okay? Presumably, these Christian feminist women want to be married. But Christian feminism provides scripts which help them to cope with the fact that they have been unwanted by men in a way that blames men and abdicates them of all responsibility in the drama of courtship. And in reality, single Christian ladies, if you follow these two rules, you will find a husband so quickly. Assuming that you are cultivating godliness, assuming that you are cultivating good character, all of these kinds of things, right? These are the two pieces of advice no Christian blog is going to tell you. because they're too scared of losing their readers. They're too scared of the intersectionality mob. They're too scared of the Christian feminist rebuke. But here are the two pieces of advice that if you want to win the game of finding a husband, if you want to win the competition with other women for men, and likewise men are competing for you as well, if you want to win, if you want to increase your chances of finding a spouse, stay in shape, stay positive. I'm assuming you're pursuing godliness. I'm assuming you're pursuing wisdom. I'm assuming you're building character and that you're building discernment about what guys are worthwhile and which guys are not. Right? And I'm assuming that you're building personality and wit and all these other virtues by which a woman beautifies and strengthens herself. And if you're doing these things, then take it from me as a guy who was single all throughout his 20s, that the two things that younger Christian men find lacking in the Christian women that they meet are not godliness. Most Christian women are not lacking in godliness. They're not lacking in personality. They're not lacking in character. Christian men find lacking in Christian women physical appearance and positive attitude. And I think that the reason that women remain lacking in these things now is because of these leftist Christian feminist scripts that tell them that they ought to remain out of shape and bitter, just to stick it to men and to hold on to their ideals, and to get in shape or to have a positive outlook on men, or to be optimistic about men and about their lives, and to have a positive view of men is a traitorous to their gender and just harmful to women. And it's actually the opposite. Okay? It's actually the opposite. Those women who are godly and warm and intelligent and in shape get married so quickly by very good men, very often, because they are pursued by good men, because they hold themselves to higher standards and they pursue the ideal for themselves, and they attract men who are doing the same for themselves, because men are looking for women who are doing the same thing. And that is not a coincidence.